Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. What is the session for today? All of you would be wondering what is the session for today. It is about the environment ethics and development administration. Isn't it a wonderful title? How we can go about environment ethics and development administration. What has development got to do with the environment ethics? So, shall we see what we are going to deal with? We will start directly about the complementary dynamics of environment and development. But what is this environment as such? Environment inclusive of the living beings, the animals, the insects, the reptiles, plus the non-living beings. So, they all cover up the ecosystem of our environment. So, that is what ecosystem is completely is what is our environment. The trees, the plants, human beings and other non-living things that are prevalent in the society, that completely is what is environment. But what has this environment got to do with our development administration? So, do we have something called as environment ethics for the country's development also? These are the aspects that we would be taking or handling in this particular session. So, complementary dynamics of environment and development. Wolfgang Sachs is one of the known pioneers in building the development administration. So, he is the one who said that environmental protection is very, very important. He said that we need to protect the environment because it is one of the major resources of our country. So, we need to protect. But what is this environment? It is a French word. It is brought from the French word called environner, which means encircle. So, as you find the ecosystem, the chain system that we find, it's again everything is represented in a circular manner. So, environner means an encircle. So, from there we have derived the word environment. So, environment damage has raised concerns at the international level, national level and of course, the regional level also. There is a report which is called as a One Common Future, which was published by the World Commission on Development and Environment and Development. What does this One Common Future report state? It focused on the possibility of economic growth based on the policies that sustain and expand the environmental resource base. So, there is a possibility of economic growth based on policies. So, policies are very important. Let it be any educational policy, health policy. So, here when we mention it is on the environmental policy. So, environmental growth or the economic growth depends on the policies that sustain and expand the environmental resource base. So, these are the basic dynamics which can help us. So, development administration is absolutely goal oriented. So, in that aspect we take that environmental ethics is also important in progressing the economic development. Throughout the 1970s, environmentalism was considered as opposition to the reduction of poverty. So, more focus was on environmental, or it actually opposed the reduction to poverty, because environmental protection is also necessary. So, environment has got a direct link to the poverty also. So, we would be dealing with that. The poor was designated as agents of destruction, which led to widespread campaigns to promote environmental consciousness. So, environmental consciousness is where many started thinking that poor people are the ones who had depleted the resources of the environment, and so an awareness of the environment began, and this caused this actually was a fact. And who were the victims of the environmental degradation? Again, they were poor worthy victims, but then this was actually caused by the industrial bigwigs. So, the industrial bigwigs, through the industrial pollution, were the ones who were depleting the resources of the environment, but the blame was put on the poor. So, an awareness, a consciousness on the environment had to be brought in. So, that is why we emphasize on environment ethics. What is the relationship? As I said, what is the relationship between environment and development? Does it do good for the development, or does it do bad for the development? Let us see now. The first point under that is trade-offs. What is this trade-off? If we have to industrialize, industrialization involves a lot of trade activities. So, when trade activities are happening, we actually deplete the resources, we cut a lot of trees. If we have to make some furnitures, we need to cut the trees. So, there are aspects where industrialization can actually deplete the resources because of the business expansion. So, that is the first thing. So, it is harmful for the environment. So, that is a trade-off number one. Second is initial deterioration. Initial deterioration is poverty is also one of the aspect here, because people used to use the resources of the environment, which actually for construction of huts, for construction of small houses that they required, they had to cut the branches of the trees and utilize certain rivers, lakes, and wherever they stay in, if there are no proper sanitation or cleanliness is being followed, then the resources are actually being depleted by the vulnerable sections of the society. So, there is an initial deterioration that prevails in the depletion of the resources. So, that is the second point under this particular concept. Third is environment and peace. We look for peace in environment. Why do we require peace? Because resources are just fading away. Our country is famous for all the resources, and that is why we were under the imperial control. We have we have got the freedom, we have got the independence from the imperialistic rule, because we did not want them to take away all the resources of our country, but yet we are not saving or we are not protecting the resources. We fail to protect the resources. So, we require a peace, a strategy or a peaceful strategy to protect the environment at large. So, that is a third point on environment and peace. Fourth is environment and poverty. People require, if people are in poverty situations, sometimes they may start a self-employment for themselves, looking at the resources available. So, they have to come up from the poverty line. So, environment is one of the aspects which is being utilized for eradicating poverty also. So, that can again retard the growth of the country. The development can also be retarded because of this. High rates of consumption. The resources are ample. The environment gives us ample resources. There are so many fruits, so many vegetables that are being cultivated, but there is a high rate of consumption also. High rate of consumption, if it directly reaches the consumers and there is no wastage, then it is a very good way of transferring or very good way of preserving the environment. But what exactly happens is we find a lot of wastage of the resources. People accumulate lot more than what is required, which should not happen. So, that is a higher rate of consumption. We find in the markets also, when there are no people to purchase the vegetables are just thrown away, they are just wasted in the markets. So, that is again you consume a lot, you buy, purchase a lot, but you do not know how to sell it, or the consumption becomes very less. So at times that is this here in this case market consumption is very high, but people's propensity to consume becomes very low. So that is the way where you have the wastage happening. But at times people also purchase ample, but they do not consume, and lot of wastage also happens. So high rates of consumption also prevails. Energy and development. Energy, solar energy, wind energy, hydropower, thermal energy. So we have ample energies which are prevalent in our country. We can utilize it for the development aspect, but then we use it very less because it is not affordable. Some energies are not affordable for the system. So we should make it available also. At the same time, people should not misuse those resources. If we use the wind energy for agricultural purposes, we need to utilize it judiciously, and we should not waste that energy. Now we see that there are 6 points that I have dealt with. Now how do we relate that between environment and development? So environment gives us ample resources, but we should not deplete the resources. When the environment gives us the resources, we should only think of how to utilize it in a very effective economical manner for the development of our country. Our aim is to sustainable it. We have to sustain the entire system as such. So that is the major aim of our country. We need to fulfill the goals of the sustainable development. We need to work on the inclusive development. So for that we have this environmental preservation also, which is a major factor to be considered. So these are the pretensions, we can say, of development. Now here we deal with certain environmental laws. So environmental laws, we can categorize, these are the standards. This is actually, we have the certain laws. The laws are to regulate the usage of the resources. We need to have certain limitations. This is how things will have to work. So you have a law, you have a boundary beyond which you cannot work. So that is necessary, and that is why we have the environmental laws here. Now when we take care of the environmental laws, we find two different kinds of laws. One is the soft international law, and second one is the hard international law. What is the soft international law? The soft international law means the laws that are given by the international institutions and which can be applied in the national laws. So that is where it becomes very mandatory. So the international laws can be applied in the national laws, but they are not enforceable. The laws will have to be taken care of. They have to be abided or adhered by, but they are not enforceable. Enforceable here, I mean, we cannot go and file a case, or it is not judgmental. You cannot go to the court for filing a case. So that is what they say. That is a soft international law. We have the laws, we have the rules and regulations, but based on our responsibility, based on the society's responsibility, we need to follow these rules and regulations. So that is soft international law. So it represents the will of the international community to resolve a pressing global problem. So here the communities would gather. Communities, in the sense, we can say all the nations would join together, international nations, all of them would join together, express their concerns, how we can save the environment, how we can protect the environment as such. So in that case, that is a way they can resolve the problem. So this is the soft international law. Second one is the hard international law, where the nations sign treaties. We have the G2 summit, the Kyoto Protocol agreement. So all these are to protect our country, the Rio agreement. So all these are to save and protect our environment. So that becomes a hard international law, because we have the treaties are being signed by 2 countries. Member countries are also present. It's just not 2 countries. We have the member nations who have attended the summit. So every nation is responsible if they have signed the treaty. So they have to abide by the conditions mentioned in the summit, the conditions mentioned in the treaty and agreement. So that is the hard international law. So these international laws will help us to know how the system of environment should be actually preserved. One example here I can give you is the International Environmental Law. Let us see what it states. International Environmental Law, it is an interdisciplinary, intersecting and overlapping with numerous other research areas of research, and it was followed by national laws to preserve the environment. So it is a intersecting law, it is an international or interdisciplinary law, it is a collaborative law, we can say. That is, it is just not based on the social sciences aspect, it is also based on the scientific aspects. So scientific aspect, the necessity for the social, the society, the economic, all these together come under the interdisciplinary research. And then it is intersecting. When theories and experiments, they join together, they can make a remarkable judgment, or we can make a remarkable impact in the environment. And it has to overlap, they need to overlap. The system has to overlap with numerous other areas of research. So the international environment says that the laws that come under it should be an interdisciplinary one, and it has to preserve the environment. What are the common principles in the International Environment Law? IEL represents International Environment Law. First one is a principle of responsibility or liability for environmental damage. We are the people who actually damage the environment. We throw the garbage, we throw the papers, we do not throw them into the dustbins, we just throw it everywhere on the streets. That is our problem. So we have to be responsible enough, we have to have the principle of responsibility, and any damage that we cause to the environment, we are responsible for it. That is what we say, the risk and the responsibility has to be taken by the people. These two have to be taken by the people, and apart is just not you speak about your rights, but the responsibility is also yours. So if you speak about the rights, see if you have fulfilled your responsibility. So principle of responsibility and liability for environmental damage is one principle in IEL. Second one is intergenerational equity. Intergenerational equity is what is happening within this particular generation. How do we succeed in preserving the resources within this generation? Because more we preserve the resources, it is going to go for the future generation. So we sustain for the present and actually keep for the future needs. So intergenerational equity also matters based on the social economic conditions that prevail in our country. 3. Human rights. Human rights is one of the principles in international environmental law, because everybody's got the right to life, irrespective of what you belong to, where you are, what is your color, what is your creed, what is your gender, ethnicity, whatever it is. But human rights is a common right which is available for every human being in the country, in a nation. It is an international right which is prevalent for the people living here. So human rights is also one of the principles. So everybody has got the right to express, everybody has got to the right to life, liberty there. At the same time, everybody has got the right to protect themselves. So these are the basic aspects which we should think under the human rights. Then 4, development and environment. So when environment is preserved, automatically development happens. How? Because we save the resources. We save the resources. We utilize it to what is actually required. And so that is your saving capacity. So development and environment has to go hand in hand. So these are the 4 principles that prevail in IEL. These are the 4 common principles that exist. And there are other common features through agreements that are being signed. So where we speak about the sovereignty of states over their natural resources. Every state has got its natural resource. So they are very possessive about their natural resource. And that is where they attract people from other nations to come into their country. Everybody would love to go to Niagara Falls. Everybody would like to visit the parks. Everybody likes to go and visit the zoos, the animal zoos, the birds plantation, the crocodile parks. So that has to be preserved. So every nation will boast, every country will boast about its very own resource. So that has to be preserved. So sovereignty of the states over the natural resources is also important here. It's one of the common feature that is mentioned in IEL. Second, cooperation between the states and being good neighbors. Always that is a major thing, that is, we should always be good neighbors in helping the other states. Whichever country requires our help, if it is a real help that they require, anything to save them from any kind of a problem, we should always be voluntarily ready to do that help, offer that help here. So there should be a cooperation between the states also, within our country, within the states, in our country, within our states also there should be a lot of cooperation. So when we have the water level, the dams which are being between 2 states, that has to be, the water sharing has to be carried out. So the concerned chief ministers should also be very judicious, they should also think about it, and they should also be good enough to share water with other state, because water is very important for the living of people as well as the complete environment. It is just not here, we should not even think about the political aspect, but it should be completely on the humane basis. So that is what they say, there should be a cooperation between the states and being good neighbors. Third one, the precautionary principle. We should always be precautious of what is going to happen. None can estimate the future, what is going to happen the very next second, also none will know. But we should always have a precautious principle to be followed. A precaution should be always taken. Let it be in facing a war, infiltration, any kind of aggression. We should always be ready, but at the same time we should always keep resources for sustainability. Then polluter pays. So if you pollute the environment, you are in charge of it and you need to pay for it. Then last is sustainable development. So international environment law speaks about all these principles. It consists of all these principles, and these are the major features that are prevalent. Now we find the development implications of IEL. So we have nearly 160 countries have signed and ratified the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol, the agreement, it started from the Paris Agreement. So Paris Agreement spoke about the protection of the environment or the preservation of the environment. Then the Kyoto Protocol came, which brought in 3 different ways to earn and trade emissions. One is the Clean Development Mechanism Program. So there should be a clean development. As the name suggests, we should have a good development mechanism. A clean development mechanism is something we should actually follow. Then there should be a joint implementation. Joint implementation is with all the nations together. So it's just not with one nation involvement, it's with all other nations also. And then international emissions trading. So, we should have an international standard, like how there should be a standard for pollution also, measurement of pollution also. Though we know what is the air content. This is the limit where the air should not be poisoned by the various emission of gases. So, that is one standard, that is a metric which is being present. So, international emissions, we should have an international standard for all the others, for all the other nations also to abide by. So, Kyoto Protocol completely speaks about how to protect the environment. So, this is also an important protocol in the field of disaster management also, where the Disaster Management Act of 2005 has got certain principles of Kyoto Protocol too. Now, what are the development implications of international environmental law? There is an increasing concern. Number one, increasing concern over the economic implications of signing up to environmental agreements. So, we sign the agreements, but then every nation has got a problem with economic implications. Economic implications is the funding. There is a concern about funding. How many countries have the power to fund for preserving the environment? That is a major thing which has to be dealt with. So, that is an increasing concern over the economic implications of signing up to environmental agreements. So, many countries do not volunteer to sign those environmental agreements thinking about the funding aspect. So, that has to be cleared in case the protection of environment has to be sought after. 2. Lack of funds makes the developing nations to forego environmental protection to increase economic growth. So, when funds are not there, naturally preservation of the environment also becomes a big problem. So, when environment is not being protected, then there is no increase in the economic growth. So, lack of funding prevails, especially with the developing countries. There are sometimes when these countries are given a stepmotherly treatment, so funding is becoming very impossible, and so economic growth is retarding. Third, some agreements like Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer have included compensation in Article 10. So, here again it is a compensation one, you pay, it is a penalty, it is a pollution principle here. So, if you deplete the ozone layer, then you have to pay the compensation. That is what is the agreement. So, how far we can implement that? Can we implement this in our country? It is very difficult because the pattern, the systems of the government of different countries are very different. So, to implement such kind of penalty system is also difficult in various nations. So, these are the development implications of IEL. But how far is it going to help us in the development? We need to practice certain aspects, like we need to have certain good funding agencies to protect the environment at large. So, emissions per capita in developing countries are actually still fairly low, and the share of global emissions in developing countries will grow to meet social and development needs. So, there are various other factors. The international environmental law has given us various kinds of principles, various kinds of conditions and features have been put forth, but how far the nations can accomplish is a thought to be worked upon. Now, next we move ahead to the approaches to environment ethics. So, ethics is very important. Let us forget about the laws and agreements that is being signed by the government with the other nations or signed with any international agencies. Let us understand, let us have our own ethics, which we call it as an environment ethics. So, let us see what is that. There are three kinds of ethics: anthropocentrism, biocentrism, ecocentric ethical approach. I repeat, anthropocentrism, biocentrism and ecocentric ethical approach. Let us see what each one talks about. Anthropocentrism it is the environmental responsibility that is derived from the human interests. The earth remains environmentally hospitable for supporting human life. Is it not? Is it not true? The earth is actually supporting the human life, but then it is our responsibility to preserve the earth. We have to protect the earth. So, all environmental responsibility is derived from human interests. So, the human, it is a role of the human or the interest of the human to protect the environment. So, the responsibility of protecting the earth is ours. So, that is what is the first ethics called anthropocentrism, because when earth can give you a good life to survive, so in turn we would also have to give something to the earth, and that can be only by preserving the resources that she gives us. Second one, biocentrism. So, this is actually pioneered by Dr. Albert Schweitzer, and he says that all forms of life have an inherent right to exist. All of us have an inherent right to exist. So, it is just not the human beings, the birds, the animals. So, everything has got an inherent right, except that they cannot speak, human beings speak. It does not mean that they do not have the right to exist. They have the inherent right to exist, and it is our duty to protect them too. So, when we have the inherent right to exist, isn't it our responsibility to protect the environment as such? So, that is the second one, which is biocentrism. Third one, ecocentric ethical approach. So, as I said, not only the human beings and other living organisms, but also non-living things must be included in the sphere of ethics. So, it is just not the human beings, it is just not the organisms, even the non-living things that exist in the society do have the right to life. They come under the sphere of ethics. So, this approach, these approaches to environmental ethics, that is, it gives us a standard principle, the ethical principle on how we should live in this earth and how we should sustain the resources. So, anthropocentrism, biocentrism and ecocentric ethical approach. So, these three approaches should always remind us of how to give back the earth what she gives us. If the earth actually gives us double, but we have to triple or quadruple whatever she gives us. So, that will make us very living in a very great atmosphere or a very great environment. So, these are the three environmental ethics. Legislative measures and administrative actions that are taken in India. So, Article 48A in DPSP, it stipulates that all the states should endeavour, they have the right to preserve the environment. So, wildlife conservation has to be included here, safeguarding the forests and wildlife of the country. The tigers are becoming an endangered species today. Tigers were once upon a time, they were very attractive and people used to envy, but today they are becoming an endangered species. What is the reason? This is because they do not get enough food. The forest is actually being depleted, the resources in the forest are being depleted. We find many animals coming to the streets because of no food. Why no food? Because of the climate change. So, there is no ample rainfall, the rainfall situations are changing. So, automatically the animals, they do not find food to eat and they come onto the roads these days. Even during the pandemic, we would have seen the roads were empty with people were not there, but then it was full with a lot of animals. Peacocks were just going around on the roads. That is because they had the freedom to move ahead. Human beings were actually stopping their movement. So, we have the right, this is a right to preserve the environment. So, directive principles of state policy mentions that it is our duty to protect the world life, conserve the world life, the bird sanctuaries, the crocodile parks, because we are going to utilize it for sustenance. There were certain other laws that were brought in under the British rule, and they were some of them were actually the stepping stones for framing a lot of environmental policies also. First one is the Forest Act of 1865. Let us see, we need not know what this consists of, but then these are the major laws mentioned in the British rule, which actually paved way for our policy. So, the Forest Act of 1865, Forest Act of 1927, then Merchant Shipping Act, Oriental Gas Company Act, IPC 1860, which is still there, the Easement Act, Bengal Smoke Nuisance Act of 1905, and Bengal Smoke Nuisance Act of 1912. So, these were some of the one which indicates, this is something which indicates how much pollution had affected then too. Now, the IPC is still prevalent with from 1860. Then the Stockholm Conference between 1947 to 72 has also given us the Factories Act of 1948, the River Boards Act of 1956. These are the major acts which has given us certain other things. Let us see that. Article 246 of the Indian Constitution, it divides the certain subject areas. See, we have 3 lists according to the Indian administration. One is the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. So, union list, the subjects that come under the union list will be taken care of by the union government themselves. The subjects that come under the state government, like the police comes under the state government, it comes under the home affairs of the state government. So, any matter pertaining to the police, the law and order will be taken care of that particular state government only. So, that is a subject that comes under the state list. Concurrent list, the subjects that come under concurrent list which is applicable for the union government as well as the state government. The GST is a very good example. So, we have the state GST and the central GST also, the Goods and Services Act. So, the taxes that they pay, some portion would be taken by the state government and some portion will be taken by the union government. So, concurrent list where the subjects are applicable for both the union and the state. So, this Article 246 of the Indian Constitution has brought in certain subject areas for environmental protection, which is for the union, which comes under union list, the state list as well as a concurrent list, where both of them are responsible. The Stockholm Conference has also spoken on the Bhopal disaster. The Bhopal gas tragedy was a famous tragedy and famous accident that had happened, and from that the Stockholm Conference in 1972 to 84 they have stated. So, here National Environmental Planning and Coordination Committee was formed by our late Prime Minister Shri Indira Gandhi along with B.P. Pal, and the Department of Environment was established, followed by the state departments, and environmental laws on water was established. We had the laws on air and forest conservation, and policy and strategy statement was also issued. So, this actually paved way for a Department of Environment in the year 1980. So, the Stockholm Conference had made the nation to start thinking about the protection of environment. So, the Department of Environment was constituted then. What is the present status of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change? So, this particular ministry has become a nodal agency in the administrative structure of the central government. What is their role? Planning, promotion, coordination and overseeing the implementation of India's environment and forestry principles. So, it is PPCO, planning, promotion, coordination and overseeing. So, it has become a nodal agency in the administrative structure of the central government. So, they are involved in planning and promote them and coordinate and see how the implementation of India's environment and forestry policies and programs. So, it has become an agency for policy evaluation. It has become an agency to evaluate the programs that are being implemented for preserving the environment as such. So, that is the role of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. What does the National Environment Policy state? When we speak about environment ethics, it is also necessary for us to know what is National Environment Policy and what does it state. So, first let us know when it was constituted or formulated. Who formulated it? It is Ministry of Forest, Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So, they formulated the NEP in 2006 on 18th May. And what are the policies that are prevailing there? National Forest Policy, the policy statement on abatement of pollution, agricultural policy and water policy. So, they have constituted on forest, major aspects on forest, agriculture and water. So, these three were considered to be very important because they actually comprise the complete environment system. So, it is the ethics. Ethics, it is a responsibility of the citizens to preserve these two. So, National Forest Policy, the agriculture and water policies are some of them that were framed in NEP. What was the objective? Let us see what are the objectives. The first objective, conservation of critical environmental resources. What do we mean by the critical environmental resources? 1. The land, 2. The water, 3. The air. Land, water and air, these three will have to be protected. Land pollution can cause a lot of problems. It can cause breathing problems. So, respiratory problems can happen because of the problems through land pollution. Second thing, we can water pollution. Water pollution can also bring in a lot of health issues. It can lead to a lot of deformities. Even in land, at times when agricultural cultivation happens, pesticides can also lead to deformities in body. So, that is also one of the cause under pollution. Water pollution also, there are some times when the plastic is accumulated in the body of the fishes. So, it causes the marine depletion, the resources depletion of resources in the marine life also. So, that should be stopped. So, that is again a pollution in the water. So, moreover, plastics are being dumped in water also. Plastic bottles, we can see the bottles actually lying on the floating on the water, and that requires a lot of cleaning also. So, it is our responsibility not to throw the bottles, plastics like that, because it can affect the marine life, the marine species also. Remember, they are also another kind of life that are living, and they are for our use too, because they are the ones which clean the water. If they do not, when they are not there, then the water cleanliness does not happen, and so it can affect the health. So, that is the thing. So, these are critical. And air pollution as such, it is the emission of carbon. Carbon emissions can cause a lot of problems. Again, it is going to the dumping of wastes. There are many dump yards which can cause a lot of problem in inhaling. Again, it is a respiratory diseases can occur, skin diseases can happen. So, it is very dangerous. So, conservation of critical environmental resources. So, land, the resources related to land, water and air should also be conserved. 2. Intragenerational and intergenerational. Intragenerational, which is going to be for between two other generations. Intergeneration, it is what is present, the present generations. So, those equity also matters. 3. Integration of environmental concerns in economic and social development. So, there is an environmental concern in the economic and social development, because it is for the society and it is for the growth. So, there should be an integration. If it is really required for the society, and if it is for the economic growth, then there is an integration. So, that integrated approach should always prevail. Then we have efficiency in government use, environmental governance, and enhancement of resources for environmental conservation. So, efficiency, we need to be efficient, economical in taking care of the environment. Then environmental governance is also one of the factors which has to be taken care of, and enhancement of resources for environmental conservation. So, enhancement of resources for environmental conservation, how can we enhance the resources? The resources can be enhanced only when you preserve them, only when you conserve them. So, that is the complete enhancement. So, we should be responsive, we should be responsible in saving or in protecting the environmental conservation. Now, we move ahead with the principles of national environmental policies. The precautionary approach, which I have already dealt with, where we need to be precautious about the resources of the environment. Economic efficiency, where we need to think about how these resources can be economically utilized. Entities with incomparable values. There are certain entities in the sense we have, let us take the trees. The trees are a great source of value, and we make a lot of furnitures out of it. And there are many trees which are utilized for furniture purpose. Some of them are very costlier, some of them less costlier, and some of them are mediocre. So, there is a comparison between them. In the same way, there are certain entities with incomparable values. You cannot compare them because their usage is maybe the same, but then the value may differ. So, you cannot compare them. So, there are certain entities with incomparable values. So, those should also be preserved. Equity, where we need to give to the complete people, involve all the sections in the society, including the target groups and the other groups, and it has to be available for everyone. Legal liability. Legal liability is where we find, for example, the sand from the beach that is being taken illegally, illegal sand mining we say. So, that is being transported, that should be avoided. So, they have to face the liability for it. And then the trees, the bark of the trees, some trees like sandalwood trees and all, which are very costlier, they are being transported, some of them have been smuggled also. So, then they have to pay for the liability. They are to face the legal loss, and whatever they are liable for, they have to. And then harming the animals, harming the deers, harming them like tigers for their claws, and the elephants for their tusk. So, these are also dangerous. We are harming the animal species in one way or the other. So, we have to be liable for that. So, there is a legal liability which should be involved. That is also one of the principles under the national environmental policy. Public trust doctrine. Public trust doctrine is where the government should also have the trust on the people. The people should also have a trust on the government. So, the government laws, if the government is framing a law, the people should adhere to it. That is the law, that is a legal law. We cannot go beyond it. That is our limitation. If we go beyond it, we are sure to face the consequences through judiciary. So, public trust is where there should be a faith and trust of the people on the government. Decentralization, it is a known concept where the authority has to be delegated. Integration, integration can be with many agencies, the national agencies, the international agencies, all the organizations, they all can come together to protect the environment. So, that is an integrated effort. So, integration can be mainly for policies. To work for the policies, we require integration. So, integration is very much necessary, and here if policies are there, evaluation of the policies is also important. So, we need the assessment tools for it. So, for all these a proper integration is required. For efficient methodology and all those aspects we require integration. Then we have the environmental standard setting. We need to have a standard to protect the environment at large. We need to have a standard, because else anybody can harm the environment, anybody can use the resources without the permission. So, there should be a standard, and we need to have a Center for Sustainable Development. So, there are certain foundations. MS Swaminathan Research Foundation is one such, which actually takes care of the green revolution. Green, I can say the preservation of the environment, the energy, all those concerns are being taken care of this particular research foundation. And we can see that there completely the organization utilizes the solar energy for their lighting inside their premises. So, they completely utilize the resources available from the environment very judiciously. So, that is the Center for Sustainable Development. We need such foundations for us to identify the right to development, environmental protection, preventive action, environmental offsetting. So, these all four will have certain link, because it is a right to development. When can we have the right to development? It is only when we have a protection of the environment. And when we can have the environmental offsetting, it is when we have the preventive action. So, all these principles in one way or the other, they are actually linked to the national preservation of the environment. So, these precautionary, these principles which can help us in the development. So, when we were studying the previous slides, we got to know about the Kyoto Protocol Agreement, which is very important for the environmental protection, and we also studied about the principles of environment and how the environmental law plays a major role, international environmental law plays a major role, and how the nations should join together, they should integrate, they should have a collaborative approach in coming together or joining hands in protecting the environment at large. Now, to conclude the session, what has Brundtland Report professed? No development exists without sustainability. No sustainability without development. So, as I told you earlier, sustainability, development, all these go hand in hand. Now, when development administration, we move ahead with the sustainable development. Sustainable development was caused because of we had the new economic policies. So, the new economic policy brought us a parameter, it became a parameter for us to judge how the economic growth or the development can happen. So, from the development administration perspective, we have slowly moved ahead towards a sustainable development perspective. So, when we move ahead with the sustainable development perspective, we can see that we need certain resources to be conserved and preserved. So, the community has to be protected. So, the government sees to that this particular community or this particular resource has to be protected. So, we transit from the development administration to sustainable development. Now, sustainable development can be achieved through this inclusive development, inclusive growth, where we say that we should not focus only on the target groups, the marginalized section should come. So, ultimately, we also think about the environment. Environment is also one of the factors that can determine the growth and development of a nation. So, without development, there is no sustainability. So, without sustainability, there is no development. It is evident that environment has a key role to play in the development of economics. So, absolutely, the economic growth always has it is proportional to the per capita income of the country. The gross domestic product also is being determined by the environment. So, it has got a key role to play in the development of economics. So, this is very much important for the sustainable development. Green growth and development must go hand in hand by employing a new approach. What is this new approach that we can think about? It is nothing but preserve, have the responsibility, be responsive to save our trees, plant the trees everywhere, see to that you water them and save water, save electricity. So, certain things are the principles that we need to abide by to support the green system. So, green growth and the development is also necessary for the economic system of the country or for the economic growth and the development to happen. Developing countries are particularly vulnerable to environmental disruptions. Why do we have this disruption? It is because of our climatic conditions. If you take India, we are a state, we are a country with different climatic conditions, different people, different religion, different kind of ethnicity. So, we find a lot of differences here and we are supported, we are protected by the mountains. So, there are chances for landslides, there are chances for earthquakes, but where this earthquake begins from? Because we keep drilling the earth so much that for water supply, for water resources, that there is a harm that happens with the tectonic plates and that can cause a lot of problems. So, developing countries actually are vulnerable because we misuse a lot of resources for our benefit. So, environmental ethics is very important in development administration. This has gained importance after the focus on sustainable development actually increased. So, to conclude, we should protect the environment, we should have the ethics and responsibility to save the environment, to preserve the resources of our country for this progressive economy to happen. Thank you.